Then motor song play.
Yes, yes, okay.
येष सुप्तेषु जागृति येष सुप्तेषु जागृति कामं 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 कामपुरुषो पुरुषो निर्विमानः निर्विमानः तदेव शुभ्रं तदेव शुभ्रदब्रह्मा तदब्रह्मा तदेवामृतमुच्यते तस्मिन् लोकः शतः सर्वे तदूनात्यपि कश्चनात्यपि कश्चन एतद्वैत 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 एतद्वैत.
Okay, very warm good evening to all. I am very delighted in this opportunity to introduce the chief speaker of this day, CA.Sripriya Kumar, a practicing chartered accountant, managing partner of SPR for chartered accountant, and a former Senate Council member of this institute. A graduate in commerce and ranked in CA examination in all pillar of price water training, food India Limited. And then Mrs. Madam served on the boards of reputed groups like IPCO and the Indian Bank, and also nominee director of ICI in the Accounting Research Foundation and XPRL Limited. She has addressed over 200 sessions. She has actively engaged in training in the areas of financial reporting, audit and compliance, industry and bodies like CA. She aggregated over 140 CS during this pandemic period. Through this COVID-19 CA assist also group. It was a great pleasure. She addressed over 200 of them. It was a great job done by her by providing meals to the needy in the COVID-19 bed status and oxygen status to the state government. She is passionate about IT and training initiative and helped in launching ICC learning development systems for the emergency insolvency profession in India, which has a record number of over 8,000 numbers. You see in the frame, e-learning was launched during a tenure as a chairperson of CPE Chairman Committee of ICE. She administrated the knowledge of sharing initiative, the smart CA, a form of ready-to-use knowledge. She served in several committees of ICE, Utility Committee, Managing Committee, Examination Committee, Corporate Law, and yet more to come. We all welcome and wish her for his future endeavor and forthwith the elections in Central Council. With this, I introduce our friend, Ms. Madam. Please take over the dais.
Thank you, sir, and vanakkam, and to all the
Welcome, madam.
members, sir. It's very, very nice because na kandipa Bernard sir la expect pannala. So it's so many senior members in this audience. I thought it'll largely be a younger crowd. So at the outset, I must compliment you on an amazing WhatsApp group, sir. First, I see 2-3 WhatsApp groups, and this is one of them. And I really like the way you run this. So congratulations, sir. So thank you very much to Saravana Sundar sir and for helping to organize this program. I was very happy to address. In fact, I asked to address because I've been doing this in several branches now. So thank you very much for this opportunity, sir. And thank you to Surya Narayanan sir as well for helping this. And I don't know if Ganesh sir is there, secretary of the branch. My wishes to you, sir, and to Kumaravelu sir, the treasurer, and the other managing committee members. So when I think of Kumbakonam, I always think of Mr. G. Narayan Swamy. In some sense, he was always a personal inspiration. I used to wonder how he was doing so many things at one time. And I'm sure the rest of Kumbakonam is no lesser. Everybody here is sort of the shining brightly types. So it's very nice, and it's a very knowledge-oriented branch. Sir, Inika, I think a bulk of the members, maybe just a few of them I see who are possibly not Kumbakonam. I think, or Tamil Nadu. I don't know if Jay Krishnan sir is the member from Kerala, but I don't know. I know another person. So I'm going to make this session in both Tamil and English, but it'll be more English than Tamil. But we can have this as a more relaxed discussion rather than something very tight. So, Inniki, I'd like to just walk you through the statutory audit process of small and medium companies. So very simply, I've broken it up into some kuti modules so that, we'll sort of connect to it slightly better. So the first part I'd like to talk about is, I'm going to share my screen now. So we're actually, this is what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about the audit process, and maybe in our 1.5 hours, I'll be able to wind up. And so somebody is going to admit them. You will admit them, sir. Saravanan, sir.
Yeah.
So what are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about the audit process. And sir, even if it's a very, very small company that you're auditing, you have to be a little careful. So that's the second reason why I'm telling us that we need to be a little careful. I'm going to talk about some fraud risks and statutory audits of even very, very small companies, which are used as conduits for transactions. The key focus of my presentation today is going to be on checklists for statutory audit. I've done about 30 checklists. So this covers the entire audit process. It covers 80% of what you will need for a client. Remaining 20% you add padikalam. If your client suppose the DEPB scheme, you can add whatever or subtract. And some key aspects on company audits for 2021. So we'll start with something very, very basic. What's an audit? Very simply, it's a true and fair opinion that you need to give on the financial statements of an entity. And you're expected to be the statutory auditor. So where does all this originate from? Companies Act. Companies Act, it says every year the company shall lay before its shareholders the board report and the auditor's report. That's the origin of your statutory audit, which is then picked up in your section 143, 144, 145, 146, etc. That is the origin of the statutory audit. So in this context, what does a true and fair opinion mean? It only rende matter sir, true and fair. Number one, that the financial statements are free from material misstatements. They specifically use the term material misstatement. Rendavathu, it's prepared in accordance with an applicable reporting framework. Nammalukku, it's Schedule 3. So my financial statements have to be in accordance with Schedule 3. So, I'm introducing this thing called an assertion. Now, I'm talking about assertions. On the checklist in which I have done, I have put the assertions. Now, I'll come to why we need to do all this is because, fortunately or unfortunately, we come under the scheme of standards on auditing. So you have to comply with your professional standards when you're presenting an audit working paper. So these assertions become important. So assertion, now what is an assertion? Very simply, this could be for the benefit of the younger members. Let's assume I have a daughter to get married and to go tell my people, okay, my daughter's 5 foot tall. She's studied so much. She's working or she's not working. She's a good girl, and that's what they say about all girls. And then the husbands get married and figure out that it's far from that. So, and that's the assertion that I, as the mother of the bride, makes. The mother of the groom will validate those assertions. Okay, is she a good girl? And that's the process of audit. So assertions are what the management says exists in the financial statement for it to be true and fair. Abdina, fixed assets. My assertion is existence. So our balance sheet, you got 1,03,52,000. The management says, look, my asset is 1,03,52,000. The asset exists. The asset is in the name of the company, etc., etc. Now, management has said, oh, this is my financial statement. It's true and fair. What do I, as an auditor, do? I do some audit procedures. Now, why do you do audit procedures? You do audit procedures because you have to build audit evidence. Why do you build audit evidence? You build audit evidence because it goes back, you're issuing an opinion. And it's only an opinion, which is why you need evidence. And this audit only goes into the evidence goes into something called as the audit documentation, which is what I'm focusing on today. If actually there's something that I have not given today, but I will be sharing is, see, the institute has also issued a standards on auditing checklist. But again, it runs to something like 105 pages of checklist, and I think it's just far too elaborate. I'm trying to mark out in each standard on auditing what is the most important thing we need to do it, and I'm trying to customize it for SME companies, and I will also share it with you. So, what are the assertions? These are the assertions you will see in the Excel sheet that I will share with you. Occurrence, purchase occurred, sales occurred. Completeness, my purchases are completely recorded, my sales are completely recorded, my fixed assets are completely recorded. Accuracy, they are accurately recorded. Complete ko accuracy ko enna difference na 31 தேதி எனக்கு goods in transit இருந்தா I should record it as a goods in transit because you have a liability there. Adu completeness. Accuracy வந்து accurately recorded. If my fixed asset has to be capitalized as per accounting standards, so and so, along with all those costs, etc. The accurate record pandrathu is accuracy. Cut off, most important. So whether it's your transactions have to be recorded within the relevant period. So I can't raise an invoice on 31st and dispatch it on the 10th of the next month. That's a cut-off violation. Classification, unga assets, liabilities in the classification, presentation and disclosure ellame is also part of your schedule 3. How do you report? Existence, very, very important. Asset exists in the name of the company, and it really, the liability exists, and the liability is a genuine liability. Rights and obligations. Ipo specific karola or question irukku, whether title deeds are held in the name of the company. Adha right. My invoice has to be in the name of the company, only then do I have a right to that asset. அதே மாதிரி நம்ம ஒரு asset import பண்ணிருக்கோம். Import பண்ணது வந்து EPCG ஸ்கீம்ல பண்றோம். So the government says நீங்க duty free you've taken the asset. So உங்களுக்கு இவ்ளோ export obligation over 5-year period, 7-year period. That's an obligation. Now your obligation in this particular case is contingent. It's a contingent liability actually. Valuation and allocation. So இதுதான் என்னோட assertions on any financial statement which you will find mapped to the audit program. The next that we'll walk through is what we anyway know. Standard on auditing la இதுதான் procedure. You can be a risk assessment procedure, compliance procedure, substantive procedures. So compliance procedures na enna? Procedures to ensure that my controls are operating effectively. So what are your control procedures? நம்ம வந்து ஒரு சேல்ஸ் எடுத்து ஃபுல்லா பாக்குறோம். அந்த கிளையண்ட் நிஜமாவே ஒரு சேல்ஸ் ஆர்டர் கொடுத்தாரா, நம்ம அதுக்கு பிரைஸ் எல்லாம் கரெக்டா போட்டோமா, மேனுஃபேக்சர் பண்ணோமா, இல்ல வாங்கி have we dispatched it correctly, have we recorded it in our books correctly? That walkthrough that you do is a compliance process. நம்ம எல்லாத்துக்குமே வந்து இந்த மாதிரி ஒரு 10 transactions எடுத்து walkthrough பண்ணிடுவோம். So that tomorrow, if there is a bank payment, adukku pinnadi voucher irukka, attachment irukka, supporting irukka. The next is substantive procedure. Substantive procedure rendu procedure da. One vandu test of transactions and balances. Innonu vandu is your analytical review procedures. See, however small it is a company, you please start from trial balance at least and don't start from voucher. Let the client give a trial balance and then you compare it with the previous year's trial balance, and that's your analytical procedure. It tells you how much audit you have to do. Or a component romba move agalena, you won't do much of audit. And another substantive procedure vande ipo tally la fixed assets vande 5 crores 3,20,000 irukku. And the 5 crore 3,20,000 ku Excel they are maintaining a fixed asset register. That subtotal, the total of the fixed asset register should tally to tally. That is a substantive procedure. So if you want the documentation for audit pathingana, it should cover these procedures broadly, which it will anyway cover when you follow the checklist that I'm trying to work out on. Now, what's also interesting is that's one way to look at audit procedures. But if you're doing an audit, 99% you will be covering all these procedures in some form or the other. Analytical review, ரொம்ப obvious. So straight away, last year fixed asset below, in the show the fixed assets are so much, so this is my variance and this is how much more work I have to do. My sales by month. If suppose நம்ம வந்து ஒரு notebook distributor audit பண்றோம் அப்படின்னா ரொம்ப clearly their season will only be February, March, April. நிறைய sales இருக்கும் ஸ்கூல் திறக்கிறதுக்கு முன்னாடி. அதுக்கப்புறமா the sales will go down. So that's an analytical review procedure where I understand my client has sales only in certain months. அதே மாதிரி cold creams. Delhi, if you look at cold creams, they basically sell November, December, January, February, March. அதுக்கப்புறமா சேல்ஸே இருக்காது. Second observation. Your client is doing a stock count, you observe the count. The third is enquiry. இப்போ வந்து இப்போ நீங்க அந்த 143 Companies Actல பாத்தீங்கன்னா எல்லாமே enquiries. Whether personal expenses are debited to revenue, அதுக்கப்புறமா வந்து where shares have been allotted for cash, whether cash has actually been received, they are pulled as the 143(1) enquiries. Carolயும் நிறைய enquiries. ரொம்ப சிம்பிளா enquiry என்னன்னா ஒரு client வந்து is giving you an invoice. Invoice is 50 lakhs. அதுல வந்து website கூட இல்ல, ஒரு குட்டி phone number இருக்கு. You're calling that phone number and checking whether the supplier exists. Strictly, we don't do this in statutory audit, but this is an example of an inquiry. Inspection of securities charged to the bank, for example, very simple, usual thing that we follow. Confirmation. So this is something I would like to insist on. All of us should do circularization of balances. Kutti client arna kuda paravalle, unga debtors and creditors ku balance confirmation please try and obtain along with the bank confirmation. Reperformance na enna? Client gives me one depreciation working, that's recomputation. Client gives you a depreciation working, Excel la போட்டுருப்பாரு, அப்படி இந்த ரைட் சைட்ல போயிட்டே இருக்கும். So அந்த working எடுத்து நம்ம check பண்றது is recomputation. Reperformance. So client will say, I am on homegrown ERP or SAP, ஏதாவது ஒண்ணு. He'll say, okay, can you, so he says, madam, in SAP, if I put MeGo, then my GRN is getting updated. So you'll tell him, pass one MeGo and show me. Okay, he will show. அதே மாதிரி tallyல ஒரு entry போட்டாங்கன்னா அந்த purchase order or matching ஆகுதா? That is called as a reperformance testing where you reperform. So again, broadly, the all procedures have to feature somewhere in the audit work that you do and the programs that you do. Why do you do this? You do this to obtain audit evidence. Now, it's very simple. When everything goes right, there is no problem. But when something goes wrong, and very strangely and unfairly, they always ask, oh, what was the auditor doing? And let's not forget, we live in a country where every component of the ecosystem has failed. And I think the only ecosystem that has not really failed is the audit ecosystem. The credit rating agencies have failed, the banks have failed, the directors have failed, the independent directors have failed. And so, but Anna, unfortunately today, see, when we got created in 1949, we were created under a particular scope. But today, the perception of an audit profession has changed. Everybody is saying, what is the auditor doing? But unfortunately, today, we serve a stakeholder. Who's the shareholder or the government or the tax authority or somebody like that. So a stakeholder's perception today is defining our profession. And it's a very, very dangerous state to be in, which is why you need to be extra careful. And it's very simple. I keep telling people two things. See, there is really no concept of a public interest entity in India. So if you look at Companies Act, independent director in the company, it's almost like, 10 different people wrote the act and then bunched it together. Women directors for these classes of companies, CARO for these classes of companies, ICFR reporting for these classes of companies, cash flow for these classes of companies, internal audit for these classes of companies. It's so complicated. Now, as an auditor, when I'm working, I'll be very careful. I will mentally make up whether my client is a public interest entity or not. So typically for me, who is a public interest entity? Anybody who's got a bank loan is a public interest entity. Anybody who's taken deposits is a public interest entity. Anybody who's got a large number of employees automatically becomes a public interest entity because the public is involved here. In those kind of companies, be very, very careful as an auditor. Appadi nama solroma, In the closely held companies, like, you come across many cases where these directors are having a fight, and then suddenly, it all bounces back at the auditor. That's again. So for closely held companies, you must have a different type of safeguards, and we'll discuss that in the next part of the presentation. Now, when everything goes right, there is no problem. But when something goes wrong, only these checklists that we do can help us. In the diligence and negligence, romba subjective. It's like two sides of a coin. So on one side of the coin, you have diligence, and on the other side, you have negligence. And on the thin rim is your working papers, which is why your working papers have to be impeccable. And even the standard on auditing says within 60 days of completion of the audit, please keep your working papers. And the working papers are a must because that's your only evidence of having performed the work. And we audit under something called GAAP, generally accepted auditing. And generally accepted auditing allows you the benefit of sampling. So if there are 30 asset purchase transactions during the year, if you have checked 5 and they are in order, you have no reason to believe that the remaining are not okay. So you document the 5 that you have checked and says, my opinion is based on GAAP, and in GAAP, I have done a testing, and based on such testing, I have come here. Before I show you, so I really don't know how we document work, but why a standard checklist will be helpful is for these reasons. You perform an effective audit. It's actually got mixed. Efficient audit na timely completion. See, another problem is the fee is a big challenge, and I am, for one, sir, I'm telling all of us need to go across the board for a 300% fee revision, unless you're the top firms where you've already peaked at your fee levels. There are 2 reasons why I'm saying it. One is the risk. When you're signing anything, there is a risk, and you need to provide for that risk. Second is your own effort. And the third element we forget is that you're actually storing that client's working papers for 8 years. What about all the office space that you use, the infrastructure, the effort in making those working papers, etc., become very important. So coming back to it, an efficient audit is one that you're able to complete in time. If our client 25,000 rupees fee, estimate 2 days of partner time and maybe 5 to 10 days of articles time. In the time you have an effective recovery in the minimum. Although the institute prescribes fees, etc., they've never been really practical. So that's very important. Checklist you'll be able to cover it.
Sorry, one maida sugar cut பண்ணு டோட்டலா கட் பண்ணனாங்க. அதனால தான் நான் வந்து பாலை வந்து இப்போ ஈவினிங் டீயை கட் பண்ணிட்டேன். இன்னும் மினிமல் ஆக்கிடுவோம் அப்படின்னு சொல்லிட்டு தான் நான் கான்ஷியஸா டெய்ரியா தான். அதனால அதுலயே பாதி பண்ணி மெயின்டைன் பண்ணேன். எனக்கு இச்சிங் ரொம்ப இருக்கு, சொல்லிக்கிட்டே இருக்கேன். அதுக்கு வேணாம்ப்பா எனக்கு அப்படின்னு. என்னது அவர் மாத்திரை கொடுத்துருக்காரு முன்னாடி, பட் மாத்திரையே போட்டு நான் என்ன பண்றது? அப்படி இல்லடா, அதான் சொல்றேன். ரொம்ப ஆசையா இருக்கு சாப்பிடணும்னா ஓகே.
மேடம் கொஞ்சம் மியூட் பண்ண முடியுமா? So the second thing is an effective audit. What's an effective audit? Where I'll get my audit evidence fastest and the best quality audit evidence. இப்போ நீங்க சேல்ஸ் இருக்குன்னு வெச்சுக்கோங்களேன், ரெண்டு தான் ஈஸியஸ்ட் வே. ஒன்னு வந்து வாங்குவாங்க, you can vouch all your invoices. I'm not saying don't do it, you still have to do it for your walkthrough. But I will do 2 very powerful tests. One, third party confirmation. If you have March accounts, April, if you're doing it, then third party confirmations are very, very relevant. If he says, yes, I've bought the goods, I have to pay so much, it's very strong audit evidence. If you're auditing in August or September, you check whether the money for the sale has come. It's called the test of subsequent realizations. When you do these 2, you get maximum comfort on the debtors which are sitting in your balance sheet, and you don't have to perform many other procedures. So it helps you to perform an effective audit. Complex requirement. So today, the whole landscape has dramatically changed after March 24th, 2021. You have a new Schedule 2, Schedule 3, you have a new CARO, you have a new set of auditors rules, you have a new set of accounts rules. Thankfully, those are not for the current year, it is for the next year. But this is the sign of things to come. So you have a very complex requirement which increases your risk of material misstatement. You can take a very clear call. நீங்க வந்து உங்க கிளையண்ட்டுக்கு போயிட்டு அண்டர் 10,000 rupees, அண்டர் 20,000 rupees ஒரு வவுச்சருமே பார்க்கவே வேண்டாம். Doesn't matter. Because if you cover the top 70, top 80%, it's more than enough for an audit. But please document those very, very well. It helps you to standardize work. இது வந்து கேக் அப்படின்னு சொல்லுவாங்க. And it also helps you to delegate work. கேக் அப்படின்னா என்னன்னா cumulative audit knowledge. இப்போ today, let's say, and it helps you to sort of distribute work. So when I did my articles, first years on the cash and bank பண்ணுவோம், அதுக்கப்புறமா investments பண்ணுவோம், second years வந்து fixed assets பண்ணுவாங்க, sales, purchases எல்லாம் பண்ணுவாங்க, third year articles will do inventory. So that way it helps you to also standardize your work. And இப்போ நான் இந்த வருஷம் வேலை பண்ணோம்னா நான் போன வருஷம் working paper எடுத்து பார்த்தே I can start working for the current year. So all this helps you to build sufficient and appropriate audit evidence. Now I'm giving you some checklists in these categories. I've covered these two. I'm also going to share the institute checklist on essays, but I will trim this checklist and send it. Again, இது வந்து ஒரு 1 day extra time ஆகும், இல்ல maximum 2 days after you finish the audit. But please ask your articles to actually build these checklists. Again, the institute is very clear. You can maintain all your working papers in an e-form. You don't have to physically sign it, etc., etc. Insofar as you have some documentation which is ready. So நான் வந்து செக்லிஸ்ட வந்து 3 கேட்டகரியில போட்டிருக்கேன். கிளையண்ட் அக்செப்டன்ஸ், கண்டினியூவன்ஸ் அண்ட் ஆடிட் பிளானிங். அதுக்கப்புறமா வந்து அசெட்ஸ், லைபிலிட்டிஸ், கண்டின்ஜென்ட் லைபிலிட்டிஸ் அதெல்லாம். அதுக்கப்புறமா ஸ்பெஷல் பர்பஸ் செக்லிஸ்ட், எஸ்ஏ, ஏஎஸ் நிறைய இருக்கு. நான் I'd like to focus on essay checklists when I'm sharing the content with you. And Schedule 3 எல்லாத்துக்குமே checklist இருக்கு. In fact, you must go through the guidance note on Schedule 3 issued by the CA Institute. Time permitting, I'll also show you one small Excel that you can use to do Schedule 3. But actually, நீங்க technically பாத்தீங்கன்னா, you can't do the Schedule 3 accounts for a client because it's supposed to be a conflict of interest. ஏன்னா அவங்க தான் கரெக்டா presentation disclosure போட்டு தரணும், நம்ம அதை audit பண்ணணும். But then in real life, these things really don't work. So it's okay, but please be very careful about this. Let him finally give it to you. Now, this is the features of the checklist that I'm going to show to you. It starts from pre-contract. That is, even before you sign the engagement letter, the completion varaikum. It's linked to assertions and it's modular. இப்போ உங்க கிளையண்ட்டுக்கு வந்து ஒரு certain aspect இல்ல அப்படின்னா அந்த checklist you can just delete it from this Excel file. And relevant reviews and sign-offs. See, standard auditing also says யாராவது இது யார் பண்ணாங்க அப்படின்ற எவிடன்ஸ் இருக்கணும். That's very, very important. So with this, I have done the preamble to the first part on what's this audit and what these checklists are all about. Now, let me show you these checklists. So this is the checklist that I'm going to share at the end of this presentation. In the checklist, la vandu or chinna index irukku. In the index vandu mudichadukku apparama neenga done nu potu varalam. And I think this is all there is to it. If you have this document, it's more than enough for your statutory audit working papers. Now, one interesting thing about this checklist is you can even use the same checklist for internal audit. So, but the way you look at it will be slightly different in an internal audit. Now, so for the next 15-20 minutes, I'll only show you these checklists, which are fairly self-explanatory. So what do you start with? இப்போ இதுல வந்து I've got some X categories of checklists for each component of the financial statement. So I've got about 27 checklists here, and I'll also be sharing the 28. காரோக்கும் நம்ம ஒரு குட்டியா ஒரு செக்லிஸ்ட் போட்டுடலாம். So I think I must have it. I'll share it. On the left side, you will have the caro elements. On the right side, அதுக்கு என்ன work done பண்ணணும் அப்படின்றது. So first is an acceptance checklist. So again, see, it's something like this. Your client can be anything. See, it's his choice to do business the way he wants, and that's a constitutional right. I can be a proprietor, I can be a partner, I can be an AOPI, I can be a BOI, I can be a anything, trust, society. But if you choose to be a company, which is what we're talking about here, in the entire checklist, again, இதே checklist, you can use it for a partnership firm. ஒரே ஒரு change என்ன, அந்த schedule 3 இருக்காது. இல்லனா asset addition, deletion, depreciation, எல்லா partnershipக்கும் it's equally valid. It's just that it will be the tax rates there. So it's a kind of an agnostic checklist. You can use this checklist. Now, what's very relevant here is there's something called SQC1. This basically says you'll need to accept a client. If KYC in the bank, you should also know your client. It's part of your risk assessment procedure. See, again, I don't look at this academically. I don't think we should follow it. We should follow it simply because it opens your mind's eye to how risky your client is and what is the risk of a material misstatement. Ipo idla pathingana, it will be very general. So my suggestion is, if it's a new client, it's acceptance. If it is an old client, it's continuance. How many of us go to our client, pay that 100 rupees in MCA and download the MCA documents? Please download panni parunga. Whether they have filed the last year's returns, etc. And these are very, very small, sort of checks and balances, but these are very, very relevant, and I'll tell you why. Tone at the top. Any issues with the integrity of the management, etc. Periya litigation edavadhu irukka. Major criminal or civil offenses irukka. Business, how is and this year it's absolutely relevant. Because of this COVID, everybody is doing badly. And when everybody is doing badly, or a fraud triangle, it's called pressures, incentives, and threats. In the varsham pathingana, moonume irukku. There's a huge pressure to show profit. Why? Otherwise, the bank will not upgrade my working capital limit. Adhe mari threat. If I don't show a good number, I will not get an order. I could be asked to close down. Opportunity. On the sales manager, commission only if I sell, I have an incentive. So in the Moonume will very strongly operate this year in a COVID context. If you are a auditor, you might want to review the past financials to see how it is. It's not so easy for to do a resignation and a replacement. So the institute has also said, the resign panni neenga audit edukringana romba careful, ensure that there is a handshake with the earlier auditor, understand why he has resigned. And I have finally come to this conclusion that it's really not worth it taking a risk for a client, because today, if something goes wrong, it's hitting very, very quickly back. One has to be careful. Auditor independence assessment. This is ரொம்ப important. You should be independent of the client. If you're a company, it comes under 144. Very interestingly, even this Income Tax Act, Section 288, they say, who can be an accountant? Only a person who's eligible under 141. Appadina, 15 CA.Sripriya neenga internal auditor sign panna mudiyadu. As a statutory auditor, you can sign, but this is just a small thing. I just thought I should highlight this because a lot of people keep asking me this question very often. Adhe madri, if you're doing accounting services to the client, you may not be able to certify 15 CA, 15 CB. For a corporate client, which is also specified in Section 288. Auditor independence, only a conflict of interest irukka, past auditor communication. Idella materially affect the risk of your client. So audit is not just whether that cash voucher and that bank voucher are there. ஏதாவது பெருசா ஏதாவது மிஸ் பண்றோமான்றதுக்கு this is a very good checklist. Now the same checklist, even if you're continuing, you're expected to fill. So நான் audit பண்ணும்போது இது ரொம்ப சிம்பிளா பண்ணிடுவேன். I will just take a printout of this sheet. I will take a printout of 1, write the serial number as 1. I will just cross across it and say not applicable. Then I will take checklist number 2. இதுல இருக்கிற ஒரு செக்மெண்ட்டுக்கும் பின்னாடி I will attach a paper. So this will be called 2. இந்த இடத்துல போயிட்டு I will give page number 2. Then what do I do? After I give a page number 2, இதுக்கு பின்னாடி I will just add 3 sheets of paper. 2.1, 2.2, 2.3 அந்த மாதிரி. So அங்கே போயிட்டு I'll just write serial number 1. Are there any significant issues? இங்க வந்து no. So இதுக்கு நான் வந்து என்ன எழுதுவேன்னா I will say okay, reviewed tone at the top on 18/6/2021 with the management. Okay, there are no major public domain reports, etc., which are anything, no adversity, no big income tax orders, adverse orders, etc., etc. Just a small paragraph. Why? Because my client is a small client. Why should I do a lot of work? Review and business and competitive environment. இந்த வருஷம் எல்லாரும் ஒரே ஸ்டாண்டர்டா எழுதிடலாம். COVID, high risk. Review of financials, internal audit report, previous year audit report, etc., etc. Auditor independence assessment. வருஷம் நீங்க செக் பண்ணணும். ஷேர் ஹோல்டிங் இருக்கக்கூடாது, டெட் இருக்கக்கூடாது, நீங்க வந்து other business association with the client இருக்கக்கூடாது. All those are the Companies Act gates which you have to maintain. Conflict of interest, history of personnel or professional changes. நிறைய கம்பெனில பாத்தீங்கன்னா இந்த CFO மாறினே இருப்பாரு. Why is the CFO quitting? Why are the directors changing? Somewhere along the line, it should trigger a spark. Now, you've come in, you're going to be the new auditor, so you're expected to give a consent certificate. இதுதான் அந்த format of the consent certificate. நீங்க சொல்லணும் இல்லையா, I am eligible அப்படின்னு. So you will give this consent certificate. இதெல்லாம் நம்ம பண்றதே தான். I've just put it in one box so that it's easier for us to follow. This is a must. அதுக்கப்புறமா client வந்து ADT1 ஃபைல் பண்ணணும். அது அவங்க பண்ணிடுவாங்க. அது நீங்க பண்ணிட்டாங்களான்னு மட்டும் கொஞ்சம் செக் பண்ணிக்கணும். Now the fourth is the most important thing. Even we don't do this very meticulously, but of late we are also trying to improve. Engagement letter. So நீங்க என்ன இஷ்யூ நாளைக்கு இன்ஸ்டிடியூட்ல வந்து there is a proceeding நாலும் first engagement letter தான் கேட்பாங்க. இதுக்கு வந்து you don't need to go and create your engagement letter. There is SA 210 where the engagement letter format is beautifully given. இதுல நீங்க பாத்தீங்கன்னா ரெண்டு engagement letter format இருக்கும். You just have to click and open. ICO for applicable னா ஒன்னு இருக்கும். ICO for applicable இல்லனா இன்னொரு letter. Just print, sign. You don't even have to do any change, but konjam just for courtesy sake go through it once. You will not come across anything significantly variant. Ipo neenga pathingana all audit. So what is my entire sector? We have balance sheet, we have P&L, we have cash flow, we have notes on accounts, we have main auditor's report, Caro part. Aprama ICOFER is also there. But ICOFER is applicable only for some categories of companies. இது மட்டும் கொஞ்சம் கேர்ஃபுல்லா you'll need to see. இங்க வந்து it will not, ICOFER யாரெல்லாம் பண்ண வேண்டாம், 1% company பண்ண வேண்டாம், small company பண்ண வேண்டாம். Where the turnover is less than 50 crores as per the latest audited financial statement. Sir, my screen is visible, Ilya. Is my screen visible, sir?
Yes, it is visible.
So your turnover is less than 50 crores and which has aggregate borrowings panna vendam. Ana, there is a fine print. This is very, very important. There was a circular dated 25 July. Exemption shall be available only for those audit reports of financial statements. Sorry, not this one. So now there is one more rider here. If the company has defaulted in filing the financial statements, ICOFER applies. It's extremely important. So I can also send a separate note on this that is not present here. I used to have it here, but please take care. இப்ப கம்பெனி வந்து 92 annual returnலாம் ஃபைல் பண்ணலன்னா அவங்களுக்கு ஐகோ ஃபார் கம்பல்சரின்னு சொல்றாங்க. அங்க லாட் ஆஃப் பீப்புள் ஹேவ் ஆஸ்க்ட் ஒன் டவுட். முன்னாடி வருஷத்து 92 சரியா ஃபைல் பண்ணலனா கூட இப்ப அப்ளை ஆகுமா? இன் மை வியூ நோ. அது வந்து only if it's a continuing non compliance you will keep doing, but there are two views on this. அது மட்டும் கொஞ்சம் கேர்ஃபுல்லா பாத்து. NOC from the current auditor, from the retiring auditor has to be prepared and submitted. Then, so the next checklist. See, again, I can give you an assurance, none of these will take you more than an hour to fill. Most certainly not. So, இப்போ வந்து understanding client's business. ஏன் பண்றோம்? ஏன்னா SA says this is how you have to do an audit. First, you have to understand the client's business. Then you have to understand the client's risk. Then you have to perform audit procedures. Then you have to accumulate audit evidence. And then you please put everything in your audit document before you give an opinion. So, இப்போ வந்து பட் அண்டர்ஸ்டாண்டிங் கிளையன்ட் பிசினஸ் நம்மளுக்கே ஹெல்ப்ஃபுல்லா இருக்கும். இப்போ ஒரு பெரிய வேர் ஹவுஸ்ல நம்ம ஸ்டாக் எடுக்காம விடக்கூடாது அந்த மாதிரி. ஸோ பேசிக் டேட்டா, வாட் ஆர் த பிரான்ச்சஸ், த நேச்சர் ஆஃப் பிசினஸ், ஃபேக்டரிஸ், கன்வெர்ட்டர் லொகேஷன்ஸ், வேர் ஹவுசஸ் எக்ஸெட்ரா எக்ஸெட்ரா. ஓனர்ஷிப் அண்ட் கவர்னன்ஸ், யாரு கீ ஷேர் ஹோல்டர், கேஎம்பி யாரு, டைரக்டர்ஸ் யாரு, இண்டிபெண்டன்ட் டைரக்டர்ஸ் இருக்காங்களா, ரிலேட்டட் பார்ட்டிஸ் யாரெல்லாம். எனிவே your RPT disclosures, things like that become important. Industry, seasonal industry, is it a process industry? Accounting systems and internal controls. See, frankly, ரொம்ப simple. இப்ப நம்ம பண்ற சின்ன சின்ன கம்பெனிக்கெல்லாம் அக்கவுண்டிங் சிஸ்டம், இன்டர்னல் கண்ட்ரோல்லாம் ரொம்ப இருக்காது. So நம்ம 70% vouching பண்ணா it is more than enough. But you have to be a little careful when you do this, because there should not be something totally wrong, especially when it's a public interest entity. And I will come to you very shortly why this audit process has become extremely, if I may use the term, very, very different from what it was intended to be. And I'll come to you very, very shortly on that. Key laws and regulations impacting the client's business. இதெல்லாம் நம்மளுக்கு கிளார்னு ஒன்னு இருக்கு, ஒரு ஸ்டாண்டர்ட் ஆன் ஆடிட்டிங். அதுல கொஞ்சம் கொஞ்சம் you need to take care. So my point is, don't look at this as very serious, but don't look at it because there is also a fee commensuration. See, you can't do audit for 10 days and document for 20 days. This will help you to close your document in just 2 days. And I do believe in hard selling this because it's a lot of protection for us. Now, the next checklist is risk of material misstatement. ஏன் பண்றேன்னா, ஏன்னா my essay tells me. நீங்க வந்து உங்க கிளையண்ட்ல ரிஸ்க் ஆஃப் மெட்டீரியல் மிஸ்டேட்மெண்ட் எங்க அப்படின்னு நீங்க கேஜ் பண்ணிட்டு யூ ஆர் எக்ஸ்பெக்டட் டு டூ அன் ஆடிட். ஸோ இதுக்கு வந்து சேம் திங், நிறைய ரிலேட்டட் பார்ட்டி டிரான்சாக்ஷன்ஸ் இருந்ததுன்னா யோர் ரிஸ்க் இஸ் என்ஹான்ஸ்ட், ரைட்? பிகாஸ் சம்படி கேன் சும்மா ஐ எம் பையிங் ஆல்சோ ஃப்ரம் அ ரிலேட்டட் பார்ட்டி, ஐ எம் செல்லிங் ஆல்சோ டு அ ரிலேட்டட் பார்ட்டி, அது ஜென்யூனாவே இருக்க வேண்டாம். ஸோ திங்ஸ் லைக் தட் பிகம் வெரி இம்பார்ட்டன்ட். அண்ட் யூ நோ வென் ஆல் திஸ் ஆக்சுவலி கேம் இன் டு பிளே, a lot of these changes which came in the Companies Act 188, இது எல்லாமே came after SOX in the US. So US la அந்த ஆண்டர்சன்ல என்ன ஆச்சுன்னா, they themselves created Enronல they created SPVs, அவங்களுக்கே வித்து அதே இம்பேர்மெண்ட்லாம் காட்டாம the whole system collapsed. அதுக்கப்புறமா தான் they said auditor cannot do restructuring services, etc., etc. அதுக்கப்புறமா தான் a lot of this focus on RPTs came. In terms of Companies Act in India, ரொம்ப clear, this act is actually called as the 3S Act. Satyam, Sharda, Sahara. இது மூணு தான் decisively decided how this new Companies Act will be written. Actually, முதல்ல எழுதும் போது it was a very, very regressive legislation. அதுக்கப்புறமா நிறைய கொஞ்சம் கொஞ்சம் டைல்யூட் பண்ணிட்டாங்க. ஆனாலும் it goes back to my first statement, it is your client's choice to do business however they want. But if you are a company, இதுதான் விதிமுறை, this is your வரைமுறை, this is, and it's within this scope that you have to operate. And நிறைய client வந்து இந்த compliance எல்லாம் வந்து ரொம்ப லைட்டா எடுத்துக்கிறாங்க. So if some, in fact, people keep asking me, Priya, what will happen if I don't comply? I keep telling them, why don't you try not complying, and then you'll get your penalty and then you can address it. So don't soft pedal for the client. That's very, very important. So, this is the risk of material misstatement. Assess பண்றதுக்கு, these are the checks. And the CFO விட்டுட்டே போயிட்டு இருக்காரு. The directors are quitting. Namesake directors. See, this is something again I will come to very shortly. Please make sure you know the director before you sign the financial statements. It's critical. And people who have banking exposure like Bernard sir would be able to say, a lot of the companies which collapse, pathingana, along driver lang kuda director arvanga. You know, and we wouldn't have even known that they would be namesake directors. Forex exposures, pending litigation. So this is another thing I just wanted to highlight. நீங்க audit reportல பாத்தீங்கன்னா நம்ம 3 comment பண்றோம். Provision for foreseeable losses on long-term contracts, including derivative contracts. Pending litigation னு ஒன்னு சொல்றோம். And மூணாவது வந்து IEPF. அடுத்த வருஷத்துல இருந்து this has become higher, but I'm not talking about the new audit rules, but இப்போதைக்கு இது 3 இருக்கு. இந்த 3ல நீங்க pending litigation பாத்தீங்கன்னா 99% நம்ம pending litigation பத்தி கமெண்டே இல்ல. 99.99%. That's because the client is not telling us. But I have a small suggestion. You have a lot of these MCA search reports. இப்போ வந்து Toffler-னு ஒன்னு இருக்கு, Insta Financials-னு ஒன்னு இருக்கு, Probe-னு ஒன்னு இருக்கு. This report costs anywhere like 1,000 rupees or something like that. But on the Probe report நீங்க download பண்ணீங்கன்னா, or Insta whatever, something is 2,500. You can take the lowest cost one. ஒரு சூப்பர் பேஜ் இருக்கு அதுல. It will give you the financials, directors, connected entities எல்லாம் வந்துரும் அதுல. ஒரு நல்ல பேஜ் இருக்கு, litigation அப்படின்னு. அதுல வந்து எல்லா ஃபோரம்லயும் உங்க கிளையண்ட் மேல இருக்கிற கேஸும், கிளையண்ட் போட்ட கேஸும், கிளையண்ட் மேல போடப்பட்ட கேஸும் will be reflected. It will give you the case number, which is the forum, which is filed by the client or filed against the client. What is the, whether it is open or closed, what is the next hearing date வரைக்கும் கொடுத்துருவாங்க. Please charge your client that extra 1,000 whatever rupee for this search vehicle. Please get this search report. It's invaluable, especially when companies are doing badly. Either which way, I think, ஏன்னா இந்த litigation வந்து அவங்க வந்து wrongly உங்ககிட்ட conceal பண்ணாங்கன்னா, tomorrow some banker will write to you saying you didn't even see this. I mean, how would we even know? But please take care on this part. So these are some of these risks of material misstatement. Either based panni, you will prepare something called as an audit planning memorandum. So ரொம்ப simple. One very good start point for even this risk of material misstatement. நீங்க வந்து போன வருஷத்து நம்பர், இந்த வருஷத்து நம்பர். This should ideally be 202021 201920. இந்த analytical review first உங்க ஆர்டிகல் நம்பர் எல்லாம் உள்ள போட சொல்லிட்டீங்கனாலே உங்களுக்கு எந்த நம்பர்ஸ் ரொம்ப மூவ் ஆயிருக்கு அப்படின்னு you'll be able to figure out. And it also helps you to decide என்னெல்லாம் ஆடிட் பண்ணணும். Statutory, limited review, tax audit. No, anyway, there is no GST, transfer pricing, specific certifications. So நீங்க வந்து உங்க work வந்து comprehensive-ஆ, it will help you to plan. Understanding of the key components. என் client வந்து இந்த வருஷம் திடீர்னு ஒரு capitalization பண்ணிருக்காரு ஒரு 4-5 crores-க்கு. It's important. Please go through. நம்ம என்னைக்கு ஸ்டார்ட் பண்ண போறோம், என்னைக்கு க்ளோஸ் பண்ண போறோம். Internal audit reports. Materiality threshold. நான் சொன்னேன் இல்லையா, 20,000 ரூபாய் கீழே நீங்க வவுச்சரே பார்க்காதீங்க. If it's a very small, if it's like a 2-3 crore client, I don't have to see every bill. I'll see the top 10, top 20, top 30 bills. I'm happy. Whatever you do, just make sure you document it. Now, before I launch on to the other checklists, இது வரைக்கும் சொன்னதெல்லாம் is general checklist. But trust me, it takes an hour to fill each. A lot of it will not be applicable. You can call this as page number 8, and whatever your notes and comments, keep it as 8.1, 8.2, 8.3, 8.4, and the madri. Before I launch into my, on fixed assets and each one, let me just tell you how this audit landscape has changed and why I think it's actually a good idea to stay in this profession of auditing. See, everybody today will tell you it's very risky, so don't do audit. My logic is very simple. If you don't do this, somebody else is going to do it. And I don't think that's a great idea, because this is our core. And I think there's a certain privilege in signing, although I have never gone on that side. I've always been on the risk side, on the internal audit side. But there is a certain pride about signing, and I think a very well-earned pride. Now, what has transformed in this audit? As an auditor, this is point number one. As an auditor, I was always bothered about solvency. A client solventa illiya, going concern. That's a fundamental assumption. That was something I had to do as an auditor. But in the Pudu Karo, Pudu Schedule 3, அடுத்த வருஷம் வரதெல்லாம் பாத்தீங்கன்னா, it's completely changed to a liquidity certification, which I think is very scary. அதுல அந்த காரோல ஒரு paragraph இருக்கு. Based on management estimate, discussion, etc., etc., the short-term assets are enough to pay the short-term liabilities. How will we know? So, and what was the key change? What drove this change was ILFS. ILFS varaikum நம்ம எப்பவுமே solvency தான் பாப்போம். திடீர்னு ILFS ல there was a liquidity issue and the whole thing just collapsed, and it has dramatically changed. And இன்னொரு issue என்னன்னா, when you're trying to do this work, just give me 1 minute. Sorry. Yeah. So that was the first important change that came in this act. That's come in your change in your Caro and your Schedule 3. But please remember, in the Pudu Schedule 3, Pudu audit rules, Pudu account rules, Pudu Caro, Yellame has been moved to next year. They have also come up with one more important concept, where they have said, if they've also brought out one more important concept, where they've said, I'm so sorry. The first one was, of course, on the solvency versus liquidity. And there are many changes where they're talking about a lot of these intermediary transactions in Schedule 3, Caro, Elame. An interesting thing, I remember now. In the Pudu Caro, Pudu Schedule 3, Elame, it has changed the texture of the balance sheet from a financial reporting to management reporting. I'll give you an example. Aging CWIP. இதெல்லாம் நம்ம management reportingல தான report பண்ணுவோம். Where is the question of it coming in financial reporting? Now, in the new Schedule 3, they are asking aging CWIP, discontinued projects, suspended projects. Very difficult. So, and today as an auditor, you are certifying that Schedule 3. Similarly, there is a pointed question. If you have given a loan without an agreement or without terms of repayment, please tell me, how much did you give to director? How much did you give to KMP? How much did you give to a related company, etc.? Now, the reason why I'm saying all this is because நீங்க அடுத்த வருஷம் புது Schedule 3 வந்ததுன்னா, இந்த வருஷத்தோட comparative figures anyway of 2021 comparatives become important. அதே மாதிரி தான் there is this is one example. The capital work in progress was another major change. They are talking about a new change of intermediary transactions. உங்க கம்பெனி யார்கிட்டேனாவது பைசா வாங்கி வேற யாருக்காவது கொடுத்திருந்தா, as the where somebody else is the ultimate beneficiary, those kind of transactions they want us to report. All this in my opinion has tripled the audit effort, which is why I'm saying you should right royally tell your client, next year is a completely different landscape and you may have to triple your audit fees as well. It's very, very important. So these are some examples. None of the examples already. So this is something again a banker would be able to relate to. So MCA suddenly decided, just give me 1 minute. I'm so sorry. Somebody was calling repeatedly, so I thought could be some COVID. Yeah, but it wasn't. So similarly, the MCA struck off some 3-4 lakh companies. Next year, they're asking you a pointed question. Is your client, did your client have any transaction with a struck off company? Is there a shareholder who struck off? Have you put money in a struck off company as an investor, debtor, creditor, loans and advances, etc.? இதெல்லாம் next year கண்டுபிடிக்கிறதுக்கு பதிலா I think we should take an effort this year itself. It becomes very, very important. So my only kind request is please go through the new Caro, new Schedule 3, because it will tell you a lot of things about the previous period. So we start with the first one, fixed assets. Now, as I'm speaking, I'll circulate a PPT to you. I will also talk very briefly on fraud risks in each component. இப்போ வந்து fixed assets வந்து எல்லா checklistume it's in a standard format. It starts with an overall procedure. So what's the overall procedure? Last year's trial balance, this year's trial balance. It has to tally. Then you will have to have a fixed asset register to general ledger. Tally இருக்கிற balance fixed asset register reconcile ஆகணும். So another very interesting development starting next year is they are saying where books of accounts are maintained in an electronic form, you should have unalterable audit trail logs. How do you do all that in Tally? How do you do that when your client maintains your fixed asset register in Excel? I'll leave this as an open question, because if your client has gone to a bank and taken a 15 crore loan saying I am a company, then he has to follow all this. Another major change in Caro. It says, இப்போ 2003 Caroல இருந்தது internal audit. இப்போ திரும்ப புது Caroல it says, is there an internal audit there? Have you received the reports and is it commensurate? And today, as per Companies Act, under 138, sila company ku mattum da internal audit. Ana Caro praharam, every company should have an internal audit system. See, the reason why I'm saying this, tomorrow, anything goes wrong, somebody can say, ninge in the clause pakala. I mean, so I'm only saying, let's also be a little defensive when we do the audit. So this is actually the block schedule, etc. Additions. So na எல்லாத்துக்குமே வந்து I've made it like this. இப்போ வந்து ஒரு component அப்படின்னா fixed assets. And the fixed assets you have processes. It will be the same all over. It starts with overall procedures. It starts with addition. நீங்க fixed assetனா என்னெல்லாம் இருக்கும்? Overall, addition, deletion, depreciation, capital work in progress, impairment, asset movement, fixed asset register should be maintained properly, physical verification need to be conducted. In the Madri, you can break down every component into some kind of scheme. So you have additions, you have deletions, you have personal and revenue expense. Why? You can even have, because this is one of your 143(1) inquiries also, specific aspects relating to capitalization, physical verification, idle unutilized assets, control over asset movements, depreciation, fixed assets register, revaluation. Again, revaluation they are asking next year. 10% க்கு மேல இருந்ததுன்னா, have you done it through a registered valuer? Who's a registered valuer? Not the bank empaneled valuer, somebody who's registered with IBBI after writing the exam. Title and insurance. Specific kelvi irukku Carola. Where title deeds are not held by the company, please give me a list. So I was thinking, what could be the case of this title deeds not held by the company? Neenga eppadi yosichu parunga. So, for example, there was a company which had bought the land in its name, a company. அதுக்கப்புறமா வந்து ஒரு ஷேர் ஒரு external party வந்து or let's assume the title deed was in one of the partners' name and it was converted into a company. No, I'll go with the same example. There was a company, B has acquired a company fully. And so it's quite possible that the title deed still exists in somebody's name. and அந்த A registerல mutation மட்டும் ஆயிருக்கும். ஆனா என்னோட company பேர்ல அந்த land இருக்காது. So such cases they want to know what is it specifically. For example, in Chennai ரொம்ப நாள் முன்னாடி they said for doctors we will allot lands. So one doctor picked up the land and built a hospital, and the land was transferred to the hospital, but the hospital பேர்ல இருக்காது land. So these are items that should have ideally been reflected in the auditor's report. Special categories of assets. இப்ப நான் assets பண்ணும்போதே இந்த CSIR அந்த மாதிரி ஏதாவது tax benefits இருந்ததுன்னா அந்த assetலாம் cover பண்ணணும். Review of capital work in progress. So for each such component, I have given you a checklist like this. So the next thing is you come to an SLM. So I have made 2 fixed asset register formats. So many clients don't have a fixed asset register. If you go through this Excel a little carefully, you'll be able to make a fixed asset register using this Excel template. For SLM and for WDV, either this is for SLM, this is for WDV. Again, it's a little, the Excel formula will look complicated, but நீங்க ஏதாவது ஒரு item உள்ள போட்டு பாத்தீங்கன்னா, it will help you to calculate the accuracy of the depreciation. So it will tell you exactly how your fixed asset register would look up to these years. I've done it till 2021 also. நீங்க உங்க கிளையண்டோட ஏதாவது ஒரு asset capitalization date number போட்டீங்கன்னா இந்த வேல்யூல நிக்கும் இங்க. The next checklist I have is on investments. It's pretty much the same logic. I'll just take a minute's break. Similarly, in investments, I've done something very simple. Overall procedures. Schedule இருக்கணும் இல்லையா? See, this is another important thing. Schedule 3 very clearly says என்னெல்லாம் you need to capture. Quoted, unquoted, the names of the companies or places where you're holding investment. Infosys, whatever, TCS, XYZ Private Limited, quoted, unquoted, everything has to be disclosed. I have seen many balance sheets where the name of the investee is not there, and that's a Schedule 3 violation. So overall procedures. அதுக்கப்புறமா இன்வெஸ்ட்மெண்ட்ஸ்ல என்னெல்லாம் இருக்கும்? Additions during the year, disposals during the year, accretion, rights issue, bonus issue, dividend, disclosure requirements. Very important. Income has to be recorded correctly. Valuation, impairment. All these acquire extremely high significance in the context of investments. Next, you come to inventories. Most critical. Why? The number comes from outside of the balance sheet. Correct? Inventory la vandu, how will I as an auditor approach? The same thing. Addition, that is receipt of inventory, issue of inventory, inventory register, inventory physical verification, inventory obsolescence, slow moving, non-moving stocks, etc. All these will get checked out. So overall procedures, control over receipts, control over issues, inventory custody, inventory ledgers, write-offs and adjustments, inventory verification, inventory valuations, provision for slow-moving, obsolete inventory, non-moving inventory, etc. All these become important. I will also send you one, along with today's, a 26-point checklist on inventory verification. Extremely important. Even if it's a small client or inventory verification, yaar panna poranga, enniki panna poranga, yaroda panna poranga, namba enge observe panna porom, all that needs to get documented in your working papers. Next is revenue and receivables. Similarly, so I had mentioned earlier, the assertions are here. Existence, completeness, rights and obligations, valuation, presentation and disclosure. Presentation and disclosure, your schedule 3 very specifically says greater than 180 days, lesser than 180 days, good, doubtful. Pudu schedule 3 la or MSME vera kondu varanga. Or payables la, receivables liyum they've brought in disputed, undisputed dues. Because everybody was saying everything considered good only, but it's not coming. Now they're saying classify it. Disputed evlo, undisputed evlo. So that's what I told you. This entire audit certification is moving away from financial reporting to management reporting. Adhe madri inventory lo what all will you see? You will see, so normally when you do revenue and receivables, you will do both sales and debtors together. So how do you do it? Overall procedures. Sales registered total on the GST, match that anyway we are very good at it. Or a set of invoices, you'll do a walkthrough, control over master data, order processing, invoicing, dispatch and sales booking, collection accounting, debit and credit notes, balance confirmations. See, on the customer balance confirm panlanalum paravalle, but as an auditor, you dayav panni direct ah edhiringa. And another reason is at least the client, what will I do if I get a cover as address not available? That way also it helps you, right? The customer himself is fictitious. See, I'm not saying all clients do this, but a lot of clients tend to take these things very casually. And one of the biggest things, of course, GST irukkarthnala in the fictitious sales reporting is not happening. But I've actually heard the story of one particular jewelry which apparently paid 80 crores income tax on an inflated revenue. Very sad. Aging of receivables, provision for doubtful debts, review of legal cases which have been filed by the company, trade advances from customers. See, again, some of this will impact your acceptance of deposit provision. You need to be a little careful. 365 days kamele, it can't be unadjusted. Cash, same thing. Cash receipt, cash disbursement, cash custody, cash insurance, cash verification. That's all. And your income tax compliance, your rule compliance. Within this, I have prepared this so you can give this to your first year article. Inge poite you can just keep cash count panitinga 13.2 page number. All you will write here is page number 13.2. So ninga or article you can print and give this off and say idukku pinnadi ninga ezhradala notes alla edhil vandrunga. Keeps it very simple. Similarly for bank, what would it be? It will be bank receipts, bank payments, opening and closing of bank accounts, authorized signatories, BRS. Very, very, very important. Please check 1 month BRS. In the BRS, a very interesting issue enna, in this day and age, it should trigger something. In the checks issued not presented, அதே மாதிரி checks deposited but not credited இருக்க முடியுமா? இருக்கவே முடியாது. It can be maximum of 2 days, 3 days, right? Please take care of aging items. முன்னெல்லாம் they used to say, okay, give 15 days time. Nowadays, I will say, don't even give it 2 days time. Straight away, it could point to an inflated transaction. அதே மாதிரி loans and advances. What's relevant in loans and advances? Loans received by the company. These are, of course, loans given by the company. Now, let me draw your attention to something very important. First of all, signing of financial statements. Before you sign as an auditor, if there is a chairman of the company, he should sign, or 2 directors have to sign. And if your company has a KMP, the KMP definitely has to sign. Now, so, இப்போ 2 டைரக்டர் கையெழுத்து போட்டு ஒரு நிறைய கேஸ்ல என்ன I've seen is இந்த பக்கம் ஒரு 5 கோடி இருக்கும், அந்த பக்கம் ஒரு 5 கோடி இருக்கும். இந்த 5 கோடி, அந்த 5 கோடி 10 வருஷம் அப்படியே இருக்கும். So they'll say, madam, இது ஒரு dormant company. So, and very sadly, the auditor would have charged only some 10,000 rupees audit fees or 5,000, but a very, very low fee. But tomorrow, what is happening is when this company is going into insolvency, அந்த கம்பெனி ஒரு 200 கோடி யாரோ வாங்கி அதுல வந்து 5 கோடி தான் இங்க. So our company, our auditor is unnecessarily getting pulled into that litigation. In this process, a lot of money was of course diverted. See, the bank gave a loan of 50 crores to somebody. The person, the company which took the loan, thought, நான் இந்த businessல போட்டா ஒன்னும் வராது, நான் போய் அங்க மறைமலை நகர்ல land வாங்குறேன், or let's say OMRல land வாங்குறேன். So our friend goes and buys land in OMR for 20 crores by diverting it to another entity. Demonetization, everything crashed. So he's unable to repay his loan. This is a classic case of diversion. Your client could be one such conduit. Again, let me make a reference. அடுத்த காரோல, அடுத்த schedule 3ல pointed question கேக்குறாங்க. In case funds received have not been utilized for the purpose for which they have received from the bank, please report. உங்க client ஒரு கோடி term loan machineryக்கு வாங்கிருந்தாங்கன்னா, machinery வாங்கலைன்னா you compulsorily have to report. முன்னாடி காரோல ஒரே ஒரு கேள்விதான் கேட்டாங்க. Short term funds have been used for long term purposes ஆன. இப்போ நிறைய கேள்வி கேக்குறாங்க. And another very interesting thing, if you add your basic audit report plus Caro plus ICOFER plus your new schedule 3, there is not a single component of your financial statement on which you are not asked a pointed question. ஒரே ஒரு component தான் விட்டு வச்சிருக்காங்க, cash. ஒரே ஒரு கேள்வி கேட்கல, have you performed a cash count and verified it and reconciled it with the books? அந்த ஒரே ஒரு கேள்வி கேட்டிருந்தாங்கன்னா on every component எப்படியெல்லாம் கேள்வி கேட்க முடியுமோ, it's all done. That's why you need to be a little careful when you do the audit and you document. Now, so on loans, so that's another very interesting thing. Although we keep saying, look, நம்ம proprietary audit லாம் பண்ணக்கூடாது அப்படின்னா, all that again, I go back to my first statement. The stakeholders' perception of an audit has changed. You audit for a stakeholder, unfortunately, so their perception becomes very important. Now, in that context, I also want to ask, some of us have to ask ourselves some very clear questions. இது என்னோட கம்பெனி, உங்களோட கம்பெனினே வச்சுக்கோங்க, what you are auditing. நான் 10 கோடி ரூபாய் இன்னொரு கம்பெனில போட்டிருக்கேன். எவ்வளவுக்கு போட்டிருக்கேன்? 8 கோடி ஷேர் பிரீமியம், 2 கோடி தான் ஷேர் கேபிட்டல். இதெல்லாம் 2012க்கு முன்னாடி இருந்திருக்கலாம், where your income tax also said in a closely held company share premium is not subject to tax. And you will notice so distinctly that for the period 2007 to 2012, this was massive. So many companies with inflated share premiums. If I am a company, right? I am a separate legal vehicle. Now, I have to look at myself as an independent, standalone, rational entity. நான் ஒரு கம்பெனில போய் 10 கோடி ரூபாய் போட்டிருக்கேன், அவங்க எனக்கு ஒரு AGM நோட்டீஸ் அனுப்பல, I have got no return on my investment, I have got no, it's not that the valuations have gone up, I have virtually got nothing, and I have given that investment, and நான் பேங்க்ல இருந்து வாங்கின லோனுக்கு I am paying 18% interest. This is not an arm's length transaction. It needs to be looked into. And if you are auditor, please ask this question, because this transaction is detrimental to the interest of the company. Idla leave the word investment. You substitute it with loans and advance. Now a legal vehicle, I am supposed to make money. I have given a loan to somebody. Agreement illa. Do you even have a legal recourse? You don't. That's why the government woke up today and said, oh, you're giving something even without terms of loan, please come and tell us. Put in your schedule 3 that these are the loans where I don't have terms of repayment. So please be very, very careful. They are looking at every transaction as a standalone transaction that will stand on its own legs. It has to have its own legs to stand. So please be very, very careful. The third element, so fourth element. Now, first signings on second investments, loans and advances. I have seen companies which had only 2 corporate shareholders. Adila ottar vandu strike off aitar. Remember today, if this MCA has struck anywhere between 3 lakhs to 5 lakh companies, namma client la irukra 5 lakh out of 20 and 1/4 of the companies in the country have got struck off. Appadina, yennoda client la 1/4 of the contractual counterparties also could have got struck off. Please check. Trial balance la poite yaarla illiyo, those things actually have to be reported next year, but it's better to be cognizant about it this year. Now, another thing that the bankers are getting very, the whole process is sort of woken up is, நம்ம என்ன சொல்றோம், சரி stock write off, I'm very happy, ஏன்னா என் client provision போட்டார், என்னோட true and fair is protected. But please examine it a little carefully. Write off na அந்த stock எங்க இருக்கு? Has it been alienated? Has it been destroyed? Have they lifted it and gone away? ஏன்னா 143(12) நீங்க fraud reporting பண்ணணும். Again, there is no threshold. In the companies mattumda irukano abiyalla illa. The Companies Act says I have to do it for everybody. 143(12) is a generic section. Again, if everything is hunky dory, nobody will ask you anything. But when some failure does happen, it's like, they're carrying around with this other solluvangle nama kaila, if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So today when something goes wrong, everything looks like a nail. So you please be very careful on investments, on huge inventory write-offs. Adhe mari debtor write-off. I mean, why did you sell in the first place? Ipo nama sila samayam nama client alla vandu edho or 10 kodi write-off illa 2 kodi write-off அப்படினா நீங்க ஃபர்ஸ்ட் கேளுங்க, சார் ஏதாவது கேஸ் போட்டீங்களா, நீங்க ஏதாவது litigate பண்ணிருக்கீங்களா, have you done something? Because it's quite likely that your client did not want to bring the money to the bank, and அந்த debtor வந்து டைரக்டா நம்ம கிரெடிட்டருக்கு பே பண்ணிருப்பாரு, இல்லனா ஓனரோட அக்கவுண்ட்க்கு பே பண்ணிருப்பாரு. So it's stripping a bank of its dues. Please take a little extra care when they're looking at write-offs. See, again, I'm not saying all this happens all the time, but how are we protecting ourselves for this against us? So these are very important things. Strike off companies, write-off of inventory, write-off of debtors, investments made, loans and advances made, litigations. Just be a little aware and don't take it lightly saying, illa madam, mine is a very small company. 5 kodi inga, 5 kodi anga. Those are the companies which have been maximum susceptible to misuse. If any of you are slightly curious and passionate about it, I couldn't locate it after that. Or நீங்க போயிட்டு shell companies அப்படின்னு போட்டீங்கன்னா ஒரு 16,700 companies ஒரு எக்ஸல் வரும் உங்களுக்கு in Google. PAN நம்பரோட வரும். And I think it's some kind of a semi-official list only. அதுல வந்து if you see, it's very interesting. In the 13,000 company alone was like huge amount of share capital. I had actually done a look up to the MCA share capital and taken it. It was a very large amount of share capital and a much, much larger amount of share premium. It was some 20,000 crores and 2 lakh crores, or some really large number. These things become very important. In the mother dormant companies get used as shell companies. And one more very interesting thing I found out in this 16,700 list, 90% of these companies were in West Bengal, which was where a lot of this action was happening. And that's why the NCA decided to strike off a lot of these companies, because they said there's nothing in these companies. Why should I even give it a legal vehicle? And நீங்க பாத்தீங்கன்னா இந்த கம்பெனி எல்லாம் ஸ்ட்ரைக் ஆஃப் ஆன அப்புறம் நிறைய பேர் வந்து ரெஸ்டோரேஷனுக்கு போகவே இல்லை NCLT. What does that mean? Means there is a serious problem. In fact, ஒரு 300 company they had struck off as some entities, listed companies. அந்த 300ல கூட ரொம்ப கம்மியான கம்பெனிஸ் தான் வந்து they went to the Securities Appellate Tribunal on appeal. நிறைய பேர் போகவே இல்லை. That was also a case of shell companies or something. Similarly, miscellaneous expenses. See, some expenses we will always validate. The miscellaneous expenses, legal expenses, penalties, இதெல்லாம் எதுக்கு கட்டியிருக்கோம் அப்படி. Then you come to share capital. Share capital, as I had told you, please download the MCA data, see if there is any change in the shareholding. Because நிறைய தடவை நம்ம client இதெல்லாம் நம்ம கிட்ட சரியாவே சொல்ல மாட்டாங்க. ஏதாவது மாத்தி இருப்பாங்க, whereas they might not have filed the return or anything. But do get a management representation letter. So very important என்னன்னா first வந்து engagement letter, அப்புறமா management representation letter. அந்த லெட்டர்ல எல்லாமே இருக்கும். There has been no change in shareholding during the year. ஏன்னா இதெல்லாம் அவங்க சொன்னாதான் we'll come to know. Because audit is 4 things: books, records, information, explanation. In the information, in the explanation, உங்களுக்கு கொடுத்தாங்கன்றதுக்கு what is your evidence? The evidence is that representation letter. And again, the institute is given a format of a representation letter. Please be chill. உங்களுக்கு என்னெல்லாம் எழுதணுமோ அந்த representationல add பண்ணிக்கோங்க. இந்த மாதிரி share capital. Wherever you think you want one more comfort and a forthright statement from the client, please add it in the representation letter. So share capital. Reserves and surplus, of course, on revaluations, there are some changes, but largely it's a movement statement that you will show in your schedule 3. Secured loans, very important. I've seen many balance sheets where interest is not accrued. See, bank on the NPA achina MOA la dhaan vechipanga. That doesn't mean your client should not show that interest. And secondly, I've seen quite a few qualified balance sheets where they say the interest is not quantifiable. See, that doesn't look nice, no? After all, what is interest? It is principal into rate into term. உங்க கிளையண்ட்டுக்கு calculate பண்ண தெரியலனா நீங்க பேங்க்ல போய் கேட்டீங்கன்னா they'll give you a confirmation of what is the balance outstanding. Please consider that balance. Because these are very small things, but it helps to, ஏன்னா நாளைக்கு வந்து நிறைய balance sheetல அந்த அமௌண்ட்டே இல்ல. So it's very important. Similarly, unsecured loans. Secured loans, you'll need to go through the agreements. So if your client has offered something as a security, what is the kind of security? Hypothecation of charge pannirukangala. All that will be covered. Again, loans we'll prepare a movement schedule. Opening balance, add fresh loan, less loans repaid, closing balance. Principal ku thaniyavum, interest ku thaniyavum. Unsecured loans. Essentially the same set of things. இப்போ லோன்ஸ்ல வந்து கொஞ்சம் இம்பார்ட்டன்ட் அந்த 185, 186 இதெல்லாம் வந்து loans received இல்லையா? So you should be a little careful. You should comply with your 186 provision. And இன்னொன்னு you have to be very careful. Your loan should not become a deposit. Now, what happens? So somebody might ask me, so Priya, what is wrong? What if it's a deposit? ஏன்னா if a loan gets reclassified as a deposit, நீங்க வந்து section 73 compliance பார்க்கணும். Section 73 ல என்ன சொல்றாங்கன்னா, if you take a deposit, credit rating இருக்கணும், deposit insurance இருக்கணும், all those things come into play. Most important is credit rating. That is why you need to ensure that a loan is a loan and loan is not a deposit. Now, how does the Act define a deposit? They have something called as acceptance of deposit rules. The Act does not tell you what is a deposit. The Act, the rules only tells you what is not a deposit. So, in acceptance of deposit rules, it will say the following are not deposits. Ennalla, funds in trust is not a deposit. I know the TDS, for example. Funds in transit is not a deposit. Or at a claim when the fund is moving. Similarly, amount received from any foreign person is not a deposit. I don't need to comply. Trade advances within 365 days is not a deposit. Loans from directors, provided he gives a declaration, is not a deposit. So the Act categorically says in the madriyana transactions are not deposits, which means everything which is other than this becomes a deposit. It's in that context you need to be very careful. So for example, another major exclusion is intercorporate loan. இன்னொரு கம்பெனி கிட்ட இருந்து லோன் வாங்கினா எனக்கு ப்ராப்ளமே இல்லை. Intercorporate loan is never a deposit. So please be a little careful, because if it is a deposit, then adukku and DPT form ella file panano, you will have to certify. Most important, credit rating. Similarly, for secured loans, receipt of loans, repayment of loans, approvals for loans, etc. become very, very important. இதெல்லாம் வந்து we are talking about loans received by the company. அதே மாதிரி loans given by the company ரொம்ப important. So நம்ம Companies Act is very, very clear. So இதுல என்ன பண்ணாங்கன்னா, முதல்ல Companies Act வந்தப்போ they said you can't do anything with your director. No loans to directors or persons who are related to them. அதுக்கப்புறமா everybody said இந்த மாதிரி எல்லாம் ஆக்ட் இருந்தா we really can't function. So somebody said okay, we'll do a dilution. So இப்போ நீங்க 185 மட்டும் எப்பவுமே கொஞ்சம் கேர்ஃபுல்லா பார்க்கணும், because of closely held companies. Although your 222E deemed evident, I'm not getting into all that, but if you look at principally 185 says, notwithstanding anything contained in this act, no company shall give a loan to a director or his relative. Unless it is to a managing director and there is contract of employment அப்படின்னு ஒரு exclusion இருக்கு. ஆனா you can give a loan to a person in whom a director is interested. இப்ப இன்னொரு கம்பெனி, நான் ஒரு கம்பெனில நான் டைரக்டர், இன்னொரு கம்பெனிலயும் நான் டைரக்டர், நான் அந்த இன்னொரு கம்பெனிக்கு லோன் கொடுக்கலாம், provided it is approved by a special resolution in my company and the loan is used for the principal business purpose of the other company. So all these trace its origins to the amount of diversions that happen across companies. So இது ரொம்ப ரொம்ப important. In the 185 compliance மட்டும் always keep it at the back of your mind in respect of loans disbursed. Because again, in the new CARO, they're going to ask you all these questions. New Schedule 3. Current liabilities. So for both debtors and creditors, the two most powerful tests for a debtor is the test of subsequent realization. March 31 தேதி அன்னைக்கு எனக்கு 3 கோடி வரணும். நான் ஆகஸ்ட் 31 கையெழுத்து போடுறதுக்கு முன்னாடி அந்த பைசா வரலன்னா there is a பிரச்சனை, you may need to have a provision. ஏன்னா என்னோட கிரெடிட் பீரியட் 45 days தான். ஸோ நான் மார்ச் 31 வித்தது வந்து எனக்கு ஏப்ரல் 15க்குள்ள கிரெடிட் பீரியட் முடிஞ்சிடுது. I should be able to receive it. Otherwise, please consider a provision possibility. Then you come to the next one. Similarly for creditors, the most effective test is the test of subsequent payments. எனக்கு 3 கோடி liability இருந்தது. இந்த 3 கோடி என்னோட கிரெடிட் பீரியட் வந்து 30 days தான். சப்ளையர் எனக்கு கொடுக்கிறது. So I have to discharge this within, X number of period. So now, in fact, I keep telling people in the new Schedule 3, I told you earlier, there is a new disclosure based on management estimate, etc., etc. Companies' short-term assets are enough to pay the short-term liabilities. The only saving grace is we audit only in August, by which time you will be able to have a reasonable handle on this. Illana, for people who are going to sign a slightly difficult company in April, May, you can make a mistake on this. But you need to take care. So another very important thing. So, ஒரு 3 terms are very, very relevant in any audit. Full testing, full inclusion, false inclusion, and search for unrecorded liabilities. Full inclusion na enna? நான் இந்த வருஷம் 100 டன் வித்திருக்கேன், அந்த 100 டன்னும் சேல்ஸ்ல ரிஃப்ளெக்ட் ஆயிருக்கணும். That's a full inclusion. False inclusion. நான் ஆக்சுவலி 90 டன்ஸ் தான் கஸ்டமருக்கு டிஸ்பேச் பண்ணேன், ஆனா சும்மா வேணா என்னோட சேல்ஸ்ல 100ன்னு புக் பண்ணிட்டேன். That is a false inclusion. Very true of a fixed asset register also. Full inclusion. நான் அங்க போய் பாக்குறேன், ஒரு டர்னிங் மெஷின் இருக்கு, அந்த டர்னிங் மெஷின் என் ஃபிக்ஸ்ட் அசெட் ரெஜிஸ்டர்ல இருக்கா? இருக்கு. ஓகே, then it is full inclusion. செகண்ட் வந்து என்னோட ஃபிக்ஸ்ட் அசெட் ரெஜிஸ்டர்ல ஒரு டர்னிங் மெஷின் இருக்கு, ஆனா நான் போய் பார்த்தா அந்த டர்னிங் மெஷினே இல்ல. இட்ஸ் a false inclusion. It's an asset that's lost. So these two are very, very important. Again, right across your entire value stream of statutory audits. I'll come to the third interesting, most important test is search for unrecorded liabilities. இதுக்கு தான் வந்து you test your subsequent. நீங்க மார்ச்சுக்கு அப்புறமான பேங்க் ஸ்டேட்மெண்ட்டை ஃபுல்லா செக் பண்ணீங்கன்னா என்னெல்லாம் பேமெண்ட் பண்ணிருக்காங்களோ அதுக்கெல்லாம் அவங்க ப்ரொவிஷன் போட்டுக்கணும். So keeps it simple. You'll be very, very robust. So I'm just hoping that out of this little presentation of mine, the only thing I want to tell you is try and find out the shortest audit procedure, which will give you the maximum comfort. And that's about it. Agaprama provision for taxation, payroll. The payroll now, these articles, the millionaires are super smart on Excel. So உங்க கிளையண்ட்டுக்கு 30 எம்ப்ளாயி இருக்குன்னா நீங்க 12 மாசத்து பேரோல் வாங்கி உங்க ஆர்டிக்கலை வந்து காப்பி பேஸ்ட் பண்ண சொல்லிடுங்க ஒரே பேஜ்ல. அதுக்கப்புறமா அதுல அவங்களே வந்து யாரெல்லாம் புதுசா வந்திருக்காங்க விட்டுருக்காங்க எல்லாம் எவ்ரிதிங் கேன் பி டன் அண்ட் தே ஆர் வெரி குட் அட் இட். பேரோல் அகேன் மாஸ்டர் டேட்டா ஃபைல்ஸ் இருக்கணும், அக்யூரசி இருக்கணும், ஒரு கான்ட்ராக்ட் லெட்டராவது இருக்கணும், அந்த எம்ப்ளாயியோட ஒரு போட்டோகிராஃப் இருக்கணும், ஒரு ஃபைல்னு ஒண்ணு இருக்கணும். அகேன் தீஸ் ஆர் எலிமெண்ட்ஸ் ஆஃப் இன்டர்னல் கண்ட்ரோல். சரி, நீங்க இதெல்லாம் இல்லாம ஐகோஃபர் வந்து சர்டிஃபை பண்ண கூடாது. இட்ஸ் a little risky because if your client has put ghost payroll, it becomes very dicey. So in payroll, what do? You do a 3-way reconciliation: payroll register, payroll voucher, how much is there in my tally, then addition of employees, retirement of employees, statutory compliances, presentation and disclosure. அவ்வளவுதான் payroll. அதுக்கப்புறமா செகண்ட் டைப் ஆஃப் காஸ்ட் என்னெல்லாம், உங்க எலக்ட்ரிசிட்டி, ரெண்ட், இதெல்லாம் ரொம்ப வேலை பண்ணாதீங்க. ஃபார் திங்ஸ் லைக் ரெண்ட், யுவர் கம்பெனி ஹாஸ் 4 premises. ஃபார் எக்ஸாம்பிள், யுவர் கிளையண்ட், ஈச் premise there is an agreement. 30,000 ரூபாய் இஸ் த ரெண்ட் பர் இல்ல 25,000. So 25,000 into 4, 1 lakh. 1 lakh into 12 lakhs. 12 lakhs கிட்ட P&L இருக்கா பார்த்தா it's more than enough. You don't need to do anything else. Is there an agreement? Is there a charge in the P&L? உங்களுக்கு வேணும்னா ஒரே ஒரு கேஸ் ஓபன் பண்ணி பாருங்க. Open the bank statement, check it. So for me, typically a rent will get audited in less than 45 minutes if you follow this. Similarly with electricity. Ask your article assistant, ask your client. இதுதான் actually நம்மள மாதிரி mid and small firms-க்கும் பிக் ஃபர்ம்ஸுக்கும் டிஃபரன்ஸ். பிக் ஃபர்ம்ஸ்லாம் என்ன சொல்லுவாங்கன்னா, எனக்கு ஒரு ஷெட்யூல் போட்டுத்தாங்க. இப்போ ஒரு டிபிக்கல் எலக்ட்ரிசிட்டி ஷெட்யூல் எப்படி இருக்கும்னா, இங்கெல்லாம் மந்த் இருக்கும், இங்க வந்து யூனிட்ஸ் இருக்கும், இங்க வந்து ரேட் இருக்கும், இங்க அமௌண்ட் இருக்கும். இது வந்து ஃபேக்டரி 1ஓடது, இது வந்து கிளையண்டோட 2வது ஃபேக்டரி, இது வந்து 3வது ஃபேக்டரி. இந்த மாதிரி ஒரு அழகான ஷெட்யூல் போட்டு வாங்கிப்பாங்க. யூனிட்ஸ், ரேட், அமௌண்ட், அதுக்கு அப்புறம் கீழே அதுல லோட் சார்ஜ் அந்த மாதிரி ஏதாவது போட்டுட்டு they'll get a nice statement like this, and then they will go audit this bill. For example, it's April 2021. Sorry, this is what is called as a schedule. இந்த மாதிரி full year-க்கு போட்டுறாங்க. 1000, let's say 7 rupees per unit. So this is how you actually, so they would just say okay. So they will say okay. Should be electricity cost, actual electricity, $67,422. This minus this, not considered as material and hence not checked. That's it. Your audit is over. Because 4,222 is very small. Why should I? நான் வேணும்னா அந்த டேலில போய் பார்த்துட்டு இது ஆக்சுவலி நீங்க பாத்தீங்கன்னா இது வந்து ஏதாவது எக்ஸஸ் டிமாண்ட் சார்ஜா இருக்கும். But is it material? So this is how you ask people to prepare a schedule. இதெல்லாம் உங்க கிளையண்ட் கிட்டே சொல்லிட்டு அவங்களே ப்ரிப்பேர் பண்ணி கொடுக்க சொல்லிட்டீங்கன்னா your effort will come down. Similarly for rent, this will same thing will be there. It's just that there will not be a rate. All this will not be there. It is just 7,000 rupees rent per month. This is premises 1. Then 7,000 rupees per month is also premises 2, premises 3. So 3 premises 12 மாசம் அவ்வளவுதான் முடிஞ்சது. So you'll know. So that you just then you go here and it will get extended. Agreement available. Name. Premises Ramesh is the landlord. Whatever. So on the madri. So you can, these schedules are very helpful to be prepared by an article assistant or somebody else. Other expenses, tedious. So with this, I'd like to conclude. So this is just an example of a checklist, a schedules, and I hope I've just been able to throw a little more light on what is sort of relevant for the current year. Just 1 minute. So in addition to this, I'll also be circulating one more small presentation which you can read on your own. This is basically about fraud risks. Ipo na sonnadhu ellame I have covered it in this presentation. I'm only requesting our entire fraternity to work today with the 6th sense. You know, we all have 5 senses: sight, smell, hearing, etc. But you must have a slightly intuitive faculty this year. Just be a little careful. So why is this becoming important? NAFRA. And another thing, see, however small we are, let me just hasten to add one more thing. No? For most of us who are getting scared, people saying, oh, you need audit panna poringla, please don't think like that. I think this COVID has actually thrown up a huge opportunity. Previously, a client used to say, oh, I'm in Bombay. How will a Chennai firm, how can a Kumbakonam firm? Today, all that is gone. People are looking at somebody good and people are looking at somebody who can deliver. Distance doesn't matter. And of course, people are very careful about the cost. So I think today it's, and trust me, you will find my word coming true in 3 years' time. You will find a huge amount of migration of work that will happen from large towns and cities, especially the metros to the non-metros. It's just that in the smaller towns, you need to make that effort. If you're able to come to Chennai or go to Bangalore or meet a client, I'm sure there would be a lot of work movement that will happen. Because today people have just gotten used to working offline. In fact, today we have clients saying, don't come. And I think this is something that will cause a far more level playing field than anything else did. And secondly, NAFRA has also sort of, and today if you see, now they've opened out something on the bank audits, etc., more firms. I mean, I'm not in that league at all, so I don't track it. But I know that there is a lot of effort that's happening to scale up. And a couple of things that I think are good are also this new concept of alliances. I think it's very good. That's something that the Institute has come up with, which we've been talking about for a very long time. And finally, even these MDPs came in as early as 2011. 2013, companies actually MDP vandhathu. But there's been a lot of sustained effort and finally the MDPs have also happened. I think alliances and MDPs are a good thing. They're very, very good. Especially for those of us who are a little scared to experiment with networks and mergers. I am for one a little scared, but I'm happy to look at things like alliances, etc., which is a win-win benefit. And one more thing, this whole thing of being in practice has taught me. See, there's no way I can capture this whole pie, not even in my next 3 births. And today it makes a lot of sense for us to sort of share work. If you're a statutory auditor somewhere, please invite somebody else to be an internal auditor because it gives you protection. The important document that I was referring to is please look at NAFRA. NAFRA reports on the Big Four, etc. I think they are very, very important. Again, they are interpreting the standard on auditing virtually like a law. Today, you have a new section 143, you have an ICOFER, you have a new CARO, you have a new schedule 2. And so I'll leave this presentation with you, most of which I have discussed. I'll just show you in every component of the financial statement, even in the case of a small or a dormant company, share capital in the issues irkalam, strike off irkalam. They could have used it as a leverage to obtain bank loans fraudulently. Promoter may have never brought in the money. You as an auditor are responsible to report it. Similarly, I had covered these various scenarios: secured loans, unsecured loans. Component wise, I've given, and it's written in a very simple language. You'll be able to pick it up. So at the end of this presentation, I will share with you my presentation. I will share with you this small presentation on frauds, and I will share with you the entire checklist of audit programs, and I hope you find it useful. And if you have anything, please feel free to reach out to me, and my mail ID is also, I think it's available. So thank you very, very much for this opportunity. And if there are any questions, I'll be very happy to take it. Any questions, sir? Oh yeah, I can see something on the chat. Thank you, Archana. Thanks so much. A producer company is using a building gifted by the founder director. The gift is not registered. Is it enough if I mention it in the audit report? I think so, sir, because I think that Karo part also speaks specifically of title deeds to land. So here again, if the title deeds of the land are not in the name of the company, you may want to mention it, saying that it is subsequent to a gift. The company has not filed annual return under the Companies Act. Please ask them to file, sir. Ena continuous file panlena, please have the check panikonga. The directors will get disqualified. Another very interesting thing, you're specifically saying in your auditor's report that your directors are not disqualified under 164 or something. Please check out. Please be very careful. Another very interesting thing is, I use something called a Zauba, which is very easy. ஏன்னா எம்சிஏ நீங்க உள்ள போய் பார்க்கணும். இட்ஸ் ஜஸ்ட் அ லாஜிக்கல் சர்ச் இன்ஜின். நீங்க உங்க கம்பெனி பேர் போட்டுட்டு ஜவுபா இல்ல டாஃப்லர் இல்ல இன்ஸ்டா அப்படின்னு போட்டீங்கன்னா அந்த டைரக்டர்ஸ் எல்லாம் வரும். அந்த டைரக்டர் வந்து நீங்க எம்சிஏல போயிட்டு யூ கேன் செக் அவுட் வெதர் ஹி இஸ் ஆக்டிவ் ஆர் டீஆக்டிவேட்டட். So this part, please be very, very careful. If they have not filed the annual return, the company where they have not filed the annual return will get struck off if there is no charge pending, and the director would be disqualified. But again, there is one small interpretation issue. Unga director ஒரே கம்பெனில டைரக்டரா இருந்து டிஸ்குவாலிஃபை ஆயிருந்தாருன்னா how to handle it is again a separate issue. Please be very careful, sir. And இன்னொன்னு, நீங்க அந்த டைரக்டர்ஸ் டிஸ்குவாலிஃபிகேஷனுக்கு it is not enough if you just get a certificate. You please go check in the MCA website whether the DIN is active. A private company is a small company as per 285, but it does not fall under the exemption of private, whether Karo to be given or not. So, sir, the gating is very clear in Karo. It says small company, private company. So each one gate you have to examine separately. And if it satisfies in that gate, you can take that exemption. No problem, Archana. All of us, I know, I mean, especially with the younger kids, I've had friends who are reporting that the kids come and peel off the screen also. So it happens with senior kids also. Yeah. So the next one is, yes, sir. Mr. Mohan, I'll share the checklist, sir. Rangamani, sir, thank you very much. If you have any other questions, I can take it. That's about it. Thank you. Thank you, Nagarajan, sir. Thanks very much. So I think we just need to stay strong and go get more audits, but do it well. I think it's a great time to look at new work, especially if you're in the smaller cities and towns. So can we conclude, sir? I mean, if it's done.
Hello.
Yes, sir. Sundar sir. Mundu.
Yeah. Very thank you, madam. Just walking through the entire process in a simple manner. Please share the checklist, sir.
Right away, sir. I'll send it.
Yeah. Through to my.
And anyway, Saturday evening, sir.
Yeah. It's a fine evening. In 1.5 hours, I'm completely going through the entire process. We learned a lot, madam. Thank you very much, madam.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, madam.
Yeah. And if anyone comes to Chennai, please come home, sir.
Okay, definitely, madam. Definitely.
Thanks.
Bernard, sir, any questions? Bernard, sir. Okay, madam. We'll conclude. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sendil.
Yes, sir.
Okay, madam.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Closing, sir.
Okay.